Shakur when she was here, when she was imprisoned. This is a clip of a documentary, Eyes on the Rainbow, the Assata Shakur documentary. In this, Assata Shakur talks about her experience in prison.
Prisons are big business in the United States, and the building, running, and supplying of prisons has become the fastest-growing industry in the country. Factories are moving into the prisons, and prisoners are forced to work for slave wages. This super exploitation of human beings has meant the institutionalization of a new form of slavery. Those who cannot find work on the streets are forced to work in prison.
That was Assata Shakur in the film Eyes on the Rainbow, the Assata Shakur documentary. Lennox Hinds, you went to court to change the prison conditions that Assata Shakur was in after she was arrested. Describe what happened to her after she was arrested. I mean, she was near death.
She was near death. She was chained to her hospital bed. After she recovered, she was placed in an all-male prison. She was under 24-hour surveillance by male prison guards who were watching and monitoring her very personal needs during that time period. We went into federal court and challenged the conditions of her confinement, where she was kept in solitary confinement for 2 years. We won that case, and that is the Middlesex County Correctional Department, were forced to place her in a women's facility. But that was a horrible situation amounting to torture.
Your case went to the Supreme Court. How you were treated in the court?
Well, there's the illusion. I wrote a book called Illusions of Justice. There is the illusion that we have justice in the United States. I made the mistake of thinking that lawyers enjoy the First Amendment rights. And I called a press conference and I criticized the trial judge at the trial and said that the case was a legalized lynching. And before you know it, I was facing disbarment. They attempted to disbar me by bringing charges against me. And they asked me to come and explain myself. I refused. I sued the judge. I sued the prosecutor. And I sued all of the members of the Ethics Committee, forced them to come to my office. I took their depositions. And the case went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court said, well, Hinds could not have understood the seriousness of the charges. Otherwise, he would not have made that sort of statement. They sent the case back to New Jersey. The New Jersey Supreme Court agreed and tossed it out.
You're still a lawyer today. And
I'm still a lawyer
and
today.
you represented South African President Nelson Mandela.
That's correct. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the trial itself, the only trial for which Assata Shakur has ever been convicted in New Jersey. You write in the preface, it had been and is my view that it was the racism in Middlesex County fueled by biased, inflammatory publicity in the local press before and throughout the trial, fanned by the documented government lawlessness that made it possible for the white jury to convict Assata on the uncorroborated, contradictory, and generally incredible testimony of Trooper Harper, the only other witness to the events on the turnpike. There was one other state trooper, Harper, who survived the confrontation and who was the main witness against Assata.
Yeah, but Harper ran away during the shootout, came back, and his story was conflicted and contradictory. And
he originally claimed that he had seen her pull out a gun.
That's right, but there was no evidence to support that. Right. As I said, no fingerprints on any weapon. They claimed that she fired a weapon. There were no arsenic powder marks or residue on her clothing or on her hands, etc. No forensic evidence.
And he later also admitted that the original reports and testimony that he had given was wrong.
Was wrong, that's right.
And yet she was still convicted.
Yes, she was convicted, and it was an all-white jury. The pre-trial publicity was such that people in Middlesex County and people from the northern part of New Jersey believed then and believe now that she is guilty. The mere fact that she was in the car meant that she was guilty. And in fact, the instructions to the jury, because there was no evidence of her doing any shooting, the instructions to the jury was that if you find that she was present and supported the action of the people who did the shooting, she can be found guilty as a principal. And that is under the felony murder rule.
Now, Angela Davis, I wanted to go to your own case years ago because it's coming up with a new film, your own history. I wanted to play a trailer to the new documentary, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners.
Professor Angela Davis admitted that she is a member of the Communist Party.
Who put her on the top 10? Everybody had a file on her.
Her first lecture drew 2,000 students.
Angela's education is now being put into practice.
Angela Davis purchased 4 guns.
There is a conspiracy in the land. It's a conspiracy to wipe out the black community as a whole.
Well, I think she's trying to overthrow our system of government, and she admits that.
The actions of the FBI in apprehending Angela Davis, a rather remarkable story.
A U.S. District Court judge set bail at $100,000.
She knows that the movement to free all political prisoners is growing every day.
This entire incident was a deliberate provocation.
They wanted to break me. They wanted me to respond.
There was enormous feeling for Angela everywhere in the world.
We know that she is innocent.
We want to tell that Pharaoh in Washington to let Angela Davis go free.
What they're doing to her is an exaggerated form of what happens every day to black people in this country.
What does it mean to be a criminal in this society?
They are not going to kill her. They're not going to imprison her. We're going to free her. We're going to win her freedom.
You've been listening to an excerpt of a trailer, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, that has just been finished. Quite an interesting film by Shola Lynch. Angela Davis, if you could share your own experience that you went through. It was right about the same time that Assata Shakur was going through what she was.
Well, yes, it was, and I find it really interesting that the FBI decided to focus quite specifically on black women, because somehow they feared, it seems to me, that the movement would continue to grow and develop, particularly with the leadership and the involvement of black women. I was rendered a target, an ideological target, in the same way that Assata Shakur was called the mother hen of the Black Liberation Army. The way in which she was represented became an invitation for racists and everyone who assented to the repressive behavior of the U.S. government to focus very specifically on her, to focus their hate, to focus vendettas on her. And I really find it surprising that when the grandchildren of those who were active in the late 60s and early 70s are becoming involved in similar movements today, there is this effort to, again, terrorize young people by representing such an important figure as Assata Shakur as a terrorist. And let me say that I was quite surprised that in the aftermath of the Boston marathon bombing, where before the Tsarnaev brothers were discovered to be the alleged perpetrators, there was an attempt to represent the person who planted the bombs as either a black man or a dark-skinned man with a hoodie, I believe. This racialization of what is represented as terrorism is an attempt to bring the old-style racism into conversation with modes of repression in the 21st century. And there's one other point that I would like to make, and that is that at the same time that Assata Shakur is being designated the first woman ever on the 10 most wanted terrorists list, the five Cuban citizens who attempted to prevent terrorist attacks on Cuba continue to be held in prison in the United States.
Lennox, I'd like to ask you about this whole issue of the FBI and COINTELPRO that you mentioned earlier on, the role that the FBI has historically played in terms of persecution of black activists and revolutionaries, beginning obviously with an incident that shaped Assata Shakur's thinking, the murder of Fred Hampton. And when you talk about people or everyone who was involved in an incident, there were many FBI and Chicago police folks involved in the murder of Fred Hampton. Did you talk about that?
No question. There were literally hundreds of victims of the FBI COINTELPRO program. These are individuals who were killed, assassinated. The instructions that were given by the FBI to not only their field agents, but also to the local police, it was essentially shoot on sight. And the case of Fred Hampton was a clear case where, again, the investigations that were conducted showed that of the dozens of bullets that were fired, at least 40 bullets that were fired, only one, if that many, were fired by the Panthers who were in the house.
And of course, Fred Hampton was the head of the Black Panther Party in Chicago. He in bed, he and Mark Clark killed on December 4th, 1969.
They were killed. Fred Hampton was in bed, and he was shot while lying in bed. And so, again, the victims of the counterintelligence program were individuals who were not only falsely accused, falsely arrested, but many of them were assassinated.
Finally, you are Assata Shakur's lawyer. Is there anything you can do as a lawyer right now with her being named to the terrorism list? Is there any way to appeal this?
No, there is no way to appeal someone being put on the terrorist list. This is a political act. And this is an act that has been done by being pushed by the state of New Jersey, by some members of Congress from Miami, and with the intent of putting pressure on the Cuban government and to inflame public opinion.
Well, I want to thank you both very much for being with us. Lennox Hinds, Assata Shakur's attorney. He's represented her since 1973, professor of criminal justice at Rutgers University. He also represented Nelson Mandela in the United States. And Angela Davis, joining us from Chicago, author, professor, and activist, professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, joining us from Chicago. We're going to break and then come back for a short segment on President Obama in Mexico. Stay with us. So the Children Play by Mana, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to Mexico, where President Obama has traveled for a two-day visit to meet with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. Part of their talks are focused on immigration reform.
Meanwhile, outside the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, protesters called on Obama to keep his promise to overhaul immigration laws. For more, we go to Mexico City, where we are joined by Marco Castillo, an organizer with Migrant Families Popular Assembly and Acción Migrante campaign, which is calling for human rights to be the focus of migration policy changes. Joining us by Democracy Now! Video stream. Welcome. Tell us what your actions that you have planned today. We're going to first go to
Yes.
Oh, yes, here. We hear you now.
Okay.
So if you could repeat
everybody.
what you said.
Yes, I will. Today we'll be protesting outside of the U.S. Embassy, and then we're going to march until to create a memorial on all migrants who have been disappeared, killed, and yes, that's what we're going to be doing today. And
why are you protesting?
Yes, well, just two facts very quick today. This morning we have the news that 10 migrants, Central American migrants on the way to the north border were pushed away from the train. Many of them are injured. 2 of them are severely injured. And we're going through a big humanitarian crisis in the borders of the U.S. and Mexico. And on the other hand, we have that between January and March, $41,000 million have been sent from Mexican workers in the U.S. to Mexico. So we have two realities. We have a reality of economic, social, and cultural contributions of Mexicans and migrants in the United States. And on the other hand, we have a big criminalization that have been put all human rights at stake on the border. So what we're claiming is to put humans on the center of collaboration, any collaboration between both governments, Mexico and the U.S.
And in 30 seconds we have left, President Obama is seen as a supporter of immigration reform, yet his administration has also deported tens of thousands of people to Mexico. How is it seen in Mexico?
Yes, well, we always are hopeful for an immigration reform, and we always welcome any effort. But the truth is that we're pretty disappointed on the kind of immigration reform that they are offering, where national security is in the center of it. We want human rights. We want humans to be put in the center of this immigration reform.
Marco Castillo, we want to thank you very much for being with us from Mexico City, organizer with Migrant Families Popular Assembly and Acción Migrante. We thank you so much for joining us. And that does it for our broadcast. I want to let you know that Democracy Now! Does have a job opening, and you can go to our website at democracynow.org. And Juan Gonzalez's new film, Harvest of Empires, premiering tonight in Houston, May 3rd at the Sundance Cinema, playing through May 10th. And you'll be next week, Juan, on May 10th at?
In Philadelphia, where it's playing there as well, yes.
The job, we're hiring an annual giving manager to head up our individual giving program. Apply if you're passionate about funding independent media and have experience with online fundraising, annual giving campaigns, donor relations, and database management. You find out more at our website, democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feld, Sarah Monte, Nermin Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sam Alcoff, Hani Masood, Ravi Karen, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield. I'm Amy Goodman.